webinar. You know, we're in the middle of National Business Women's Week. Now, lucky for us, we've got one on the program today. And let me tell you, we're getting down to business in this webinar, the business of net zero. We're going to explore how to reach net zero in the housing sector by 2030 with sustainable design and construction practices and on-site microgrid renewable energy generation. Now, who is this we I'm referring to? Well, the first of our duo today is Sarah Gutterman, co-founder and CEO of Green Builder Media. Sarah is a former venture capitalist and graduated cum laude from Dartmouth College and holds an MBA in entrepreneurship and finance from the University of Colorado. She's going to lead us through some cognition smart data market intelligence about net zero energy, water, and carbon trends, including consumer demand, preferences, and purchase patterns. Now, the other person in our super duo is Sam Rashkin, former chief architect at the Department of Energy and founder of the Housing 2.0 program. And that includes his latest book, Housing 2.0, A Disruption Survival Guide. Now, today, he's going to explain how zero energy ready can be accomplished with one simple federal government policy change at no cost to the Treasury, while yielding massive economic, environmental, job growth, and health benefits to the nation. Now, before we go any further, being this is National Business Women's Week and all, I need to tell you about some companies that employ some dynamic business women. They also happen to be our sponsors. The first is Mitsubishi Electric. Mitsubishi Electric promotes sustainable building through the electrification of residential and commercial heating and cooling products. Their mission is to advance technologies that reduce waste output, promote sustainable resource cycles, while increasing energy efficiency and eliminating dependence on fossil fuels. And next is Westlake Royal Building Products. They are the North American leader in the innovation, design, and production of a broad and diverse range of exterior and interior building products, including siding and accessories, trim and moldings, roofing, stone, windows, and outdoor living. For more than 50 years, Westlake Royal Building Products has manufactured high-quality, low-maintenance products to meet the specifications and needs of building professionals, homeowners, architects, engineers, and distributors, while providing stunning curb appeal with an unmatched array of colors, styles, and accessories. For more information, please visit the website, which is westlakeroyalbuildingproducts.com. We've also got Schneider Electric with us. They are driving the digital transformation of modern homes with smart and sustainable energy solutions for ultimate comfort and energy efficiency. Their connected home ecosystem of smart energy management solutions provides digital control of energy use throughout a home, from the grid by their smart electrical panel to their connected wiring devices. This grid-to-plug solution makes it significantly easier to create smart solar power and backup power homes, both now and in the future. And did you know that Panasonic Healthy Indoor Living Solutions is helping builders across the country differentiate themselves with powerful, code-compliant, and cost-effective indoor air quality solutions that provide a safer environment for home buyers? And PowerShift by NV Energy is a program that helps residential and business customers conserve energy and save money on their power bills. PowerShift is a one-stop resource to find energy-efficient products and services. For more information on their program, please visit nvenergy.com/PowerShift. Finally, we have our newest sponsor. Dupont Performance Building Solutions is a global innovation leader in the building and construction industry, providing products and materials for all 6 sides of the building envelope. By developing solutions for managing the air, water, and thermal performance of buildings and residences, Dupont helps their customers build energy efficient, resilient, and durable shelters in a rapidly changing world. Backed by unmatched industry insight, building knowledge, and technical support, as well as world-class brands such as Tyvek, Firefoam, and Great Stuff, their products and services portfolio enables customers to focus on what they do best, no matter where and how they choose to build. All right, did you know you can submit questions for Sarah and Sam? You can. Simply use the questions box in the GoToWebinar control panel. I'm going to review those questions and pose them to Sarah and Sam during the Q&A time set aside after the presentation. Now, Sarah, since it is National Business Women's Week, it is only appropriate we start with you.
Thank you so much, Mike, and thanks to everyone here in attendance. Really always happy to have the opportunity to present Green Builder Media Insights and Cognition Smart Data. And thank you so much to Sam Rashkin for joining forces with us on the Housing 2.0 program. And then a special thank you to Mary Kessner, our production manager, who's the wizard behind the curtain making it all happen. I want to just note, Mike, that was a rather lengthy intro with all of our sponsor information, but clearly what that shows is that there are not only exceptional companies and utilities that are supporting our work, but are really helping to transform the housing sector and the building industry. And so, Sam, again, really a shout out to you for conceiving of the Housing 2.0 program and joining forces with us to launch and disseminate it. And again, thanks to all of our attendees, because you're the proof point that housing transformation is here, and that what we're discussing today and every day is of paramount importance and very much supported at all levels of the industry. So I'm going to start off with some information about net zero, the concept, what it means, why it's important, and why it's really inevitable. And then I'm going to try to speed through my part fairly quickly and pass things over to Sam so that he can take the bulk of our time to talk about some of his thoughts and insights, which are pretty extraordinary. So when people think about net zero, I would say most often we think about net zero energy. That's kind of the default and the low-hanging fruit in some respects. But when we talk about net zero, we really look at net zero energy, water, waste, decarbonization, so net zero carbon. And so that really broadens this discussion about what net zero is and how we can get there and what we have to do to get there. In the built environment. And that all of a sudden becomes a lot more comprehensive a discussion if we're looking at things like carbon emission cycles and everything in terms of the net zero roadmap, from expedited renewable energy adoption to the electrification of the built environment, and that should say transportation, complete transformation of our manufacturing and industrial processes, different land use approaches and processes, and then certainly shifting valuation metrics and lending practices. So why do we even care? Why is getting to net zero in the built environment important? Here are some statistics that Sam and myself and others that talk about this regularly cite quite often in terms of energy use, electricity use, carbon emissions. To me, perhaps the most daunting stat on this slide that we all cite a lot is just the fact that over the next 35 years is expected that 2 trillion square feet of built space will be constructed every 35 days, right? So that's the equivalent of basically the size of New York City. And so you can understand why getting to net zero energy, water, and carbon is of paramount importance if basically we're going to have a chance, not just of hitting our climate goals, but really of survival. So, right, that's the sense of urgency. That's the level of urgency that we're talking about right now. So when we think about getting to net zero, we have to start by considering sustainable design. And this isn't just about orientation and looking at passive house strategies, but it's really about designing based on a changing climate, designing for climate responsiveness. In our Cognition Smart data, we collect a lot of data around climate-related sentiment and purchase drivers. And we recently just finished a survey where we asked homeowners and home buyers about the climate-related aspects that impact them the most when making home buying decisions. And extreme temperatures was the #1 response. And so we need to start designing with extreme temperature and other climate-related disasters, whether those are wildfires in the West or superstorms and flooding in the East, with all of those things in mind. And then we can go to proper orientation and thermal mass and building envelope and duct losses and things like that. We also absolutely cannot talk about net zero, of course, without talking about energy efficiency. Fortunately, the main point here, without going into all of the details and the stats on this slide, is that the numbers are penciling out, especially if we're looking at full cost rather than first cost. I think we can all agree that first cost is no longer a relevant valuation metric, and we shouldn't be building homes that are just based on lowest upfront cost, because all that means is that we are building the homes with the worst performance, that are not healthy, not connected, not resilient, not renewable energy powered. But if we look at that full cost and we look at how we're going to actually end up saving homeowners money, making builders more money on the front end because of that value proposition, all of a sudden this becomes a no-brainer. The pathway to net zero also has to go through electrification. Unfortunately, we're seeing jurisdictions from coast to coast either require or incentivize electrification. And then that's being followed by incredible advances in electrification, enabling technologies, net zero enabling technologies. So everything from solar plus storage to super high performance HVAC, water heating systems, induction cooktops, dryers, demand side energy management systems, which are optimizing energy use within the home, but then also helping to reduce grid stress by doing things like peak load shifting and shedding. Also things like electrical vehicle to grid technology, which allow EVs to be, kind of that backup power source, either in times of peak load to reduce that grid stress, or in times of, when the grid's down or emergency. But again, we have to look beyond energy to net zero water. We are seeing water tap fees explode across the country. Here where I am in Colorado, water tap fees have increased by up to 400% in some municipalities along the Front Range. And, we're really seeing the price of access to water kind of halting developments and communities. And, let's be honest, if there's no water, there are no permits. We are also starting to see a lot of municipalities across the country require net zero water impact plans and studies that have to be submitted by builders and developers before they actually get a permit or before they get approved for communities and developments. Now, fortunately, we're also seeing a lot of advancements on the water innovation side, everything from, low flow plumbing fixtures and appliances, which is just the baseline, right? That's just a no-brainer and should be in every single home, but all the way through to, big increases in adoption of leak detection and water monitoring systems. We're actually seeing movement on the water utility side to drive those types of systems, gray water systems, smart irrigation systems, roof and rainwater capture systems, things like structured plumbing, and then hot water recirculatory switches, which also have huge impacts on water use and also energy used from water heating. And then some really cool technologies that we have our eye on, like atmospheric generators that pull water out of the air for potable water. And these are now not just for more humid climates, but they've actually, some of this technology has been created by the Department of Defense for very arid climates as well. And then, of course, we need to shift the whole discussion to net zero carbon. And this is looking at that entire life cycle of carbon emissions, from raw material extraction to transportation to manufacturing to more transportation to use in a building, all the way through to end of life. We are starting to see net zero carbon codes getting adopted, like in Oregon, that are pretty aggressive in terms of carbon reductions in both new and existing buildings. And then, of course, we've got the Inflation Reduction Act, which is obviously going to provide a tremendous amount of funding in rebates and incentives for everything from electric heating and cooling systems, water heatings, induction cooktops, heat pump technology, renewable energy. And so, we aren't totally clear on how building professionals and homeowners are going to be able to access those funds. Those guidelines are expected within the next, I don't know, let's say 2 to 8 weeks. Sam may have a clearer line of sight into when we'll kind of really start finalizing, kind of those allocations of those funds. But suffice to say, I do think that the Inflation Reduction Act is going to really create a sea change in terms of the cost efficacy of net zero energy, water, and carbon upgrades and technologies in the built environment. Now, beyond the IRA, we are starting to see more incentives like municipalities offering reductions on property taxes for net zero and all electric homes. Certainly, we're seeing a greater adoption of technology, sustainable design, and building science best practices. We're also seeing a lot of performance modeling and metrics, both on the front end with that modeling as well as on the back end with diagnostics and data collection that are creating data and proof points for net zero. I'd like to see a lot more net zero reporting at the point of sale, and the energy piece is pretty easy. The water piece is pretty easy. The carbon piece is a little bit harder still. Green Builder Media is pulling together an ESG working group. If anyone is interested in participating in that, we've got an awesome group of building professionals, building industry, organization representatives, investors, folks from manufacturers. Sam's on our group as well. But we're trying to figure out the carbon measurement element for the built environment, because that's still a little bit obscure. And then, of course, we are still facing the labor challenges, not only in terms of labor shortages, but the challenges with respect to certain types of building professionals and contractors kind of not really adopting new types of technologies and being a little bit afraid of change. Other challenges in getting to net zero really include utility readiness, right? We don't actually have the utility infrastructure to transition to a fully net zero all electric environment. And who's going to pay for that? That's really the big question right now. Is it the homeowners that are going to pay? Will the utilities actually pay to upgrade the infrastructure to update their transformers and their conductors and service panels? Will they continue to add more renewable generation sources? I think that one's an inevitability. I do also think that those utilities are going to continue to promote rebate programs for things like smart thermostats, home energy assessments, demand-side energy management technology, and then, of course, on the water side, the leak detection and water monitoring use. So, we're starting to see more movement in this direction, and hopefully those funds from the Inflation Reduction Act will help to solve some of these challenges in terms of, who's going to pay, how we're going to allocate those funds. But at the end of the day, I think what's most important here is that we have to not only implement the policies around net zero, which Sam's going to talk about in just a minute, but we have to leverage net zero as a business opportunity where higher performance, healthier, more resilient, smarter, solar-powered homes are absolutely consistent with better value homes that actually yield a greater return for building professionals and provide more comfort for homeowners. Because all of those things are intricately linked, right? We cannot disassociate those anymore. And that's particularly important because we have this huge gap in missing middle homes, about 3.8 million missing middle homes, probably even more than that. And that's why we think that the housing market, despite the fact that some prices are going down in most markets and there's high interest rates and, of course, inflation, there's still this huge gap in or a huge deficit in the amount of homes that we actually have. And so we have to look at net zero, again, as something that's transformational in terms of how we can change the housing ecosystem and look at homes as a panacea for health and wellness and as a way to actually create generational wealth, right? We're creating higher performance, better homes that can pass from homeowner to homeowner or generation to generation in a way that actually does help accumulate family wealth, but also in terms of solutions that are sustainable, minimize waste, optimize quality control, solve for labor challenges, et cetera. And that, of course, also plays into rethinking the way that we use our land, our financing vehicles, our lending approach, our appraisal approach, et cetera. So the last couple of slides that I have really have to do with why net zero is truly an inevitability, and that's because of market demand. We all know, I think at this point, that millennials and older Gen Zs are the top influencers in the housing market, spending more money on buying and remodeling homes than any other audience segment. And their number one concern is failure to mitigate and adapt to climate change, more so than COVID, more so than economic or social instability, more so than terrorist activity or gun violence. I wish that water was higher up on this list. I wish it was second, because I believe that water is the absolute, kind of critical topic of our moment. And, we've kind of solved for energy. Now we need to solve for water. But you can see, climate change is very real and top of mind, and is impacting consumers. You can see here, this is from a recent cognition survey. We asked how much our consumer audience is willing to spend on these various different sustainability upgrades. And you can see, there's a pretty high percentage that will spend up to 10 grand on energy efficiency upgrades, renewable energy, water conservation, healthy home. These are all areas that our consumer audience tells us they will spend money on. Then when we ask our builders a related question in terms of what their clients are willing to pay for, you can see, there's definitely willingness to spend some money on solar PV, battery storage, demand-side energy management, smart thermostats, energy efficient and water efficient appliances, et cetera. When we ask if folks would buy a net zero home, you can see over half of our audience said yes. When we ask what the biggest benefits are to buying a net zero home, reducing environmental footprint, having a healthier and higher performance home, those are all top of mind. And then you can see, again, high level of interest in investing in things like heat pump, heating and cooling systems, and water heaters, solar systems, smart thermostats. And, again, when we ask if it's important for homes to be energy efficiency, this one's a no-brainer. And then also same thing at this point with, we've asked our consumer audience whether they think it's important to have solar panels and battery storage. And again, the level of awareness about these things is, well, the numbers speak for themselves. So that's all I have. I've got my email address on here. If anyone has any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. We may have some time at the end for questions. But with that, Sam, I'm going to kick it back over to you and take it away, please.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. I'm going to show my screen now, and I think we'll be good. So welcome, everyone. I call this session 0. It's not just for buildings. And this is kind of a very personal presentation for me. It's based on a lot of what I learned running national programs, and then extrapolating to opportunities how we could do get to zero so much more efficiently with so much less waste. So this is a pretty 30,000 foot level presentation. I'm going to start with the leadership imperative, then go to the zero imperative, a little bit of overlap with what Sarah just presented, very little, but then the efficient government imperative, and see if we can see some outstanding opportunities just to be better. Getting there is another thing. We'll just talk about that as well. So let's start with the leadership imperative. And this, for me, begins by understanding the journey to wisdom. It all starts with collecting data, but data is just raw measurements, and they may or they may not be useful. But we're so obsessively focused on collecting data, and data is just not good enough. What we want to do is, if we can identify trends, convert the data into information. And that's insight based on the assembled data that we can put in buckets or find some way that they group so we have a better understanding of subject matter that we're looking at. But if we can then look at those trends and be able to construct principles, we now have knowledge, which becomes subject area expertise based on the information. So we can do better in the field of endeavor that we're studying. But the ultimate peak of the pyramid is when you apply experience. Now you have wisdom, which is really leadership based on the combination of knowledge and experience. And what's really important here is that in the absence of wisdom, things can usually go wrong. Knowledge is knowing tomatoes are fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. So although this is a small attempt at kind of a bit of humor here, this is the degree with which you can go wrong just with knowledge. And so wisdom is so important. I'm going to suggest it's often missing in these big critical times we have right now to just protect our planet or our political concerns we have. And so just to give you a sense of this, I can want to take a trip from New York to London and just be a few degrees off and wind up in another continent. And just the significance of this is just a small little miscalculation in applying wisdom and leadership gets us into a completely wrong outcome. So let's start with moving forward with this understanding of just leadership, the zero imperative. And as Sarah said, we're kind of stuck. There is no planet B. There is no way we're going to get 8 billion, 9 billion, 11 billion people by the end of the century we're in right now to another planet. This is the best planet we got, and we got to make it work. And when we measure the Earth system units, the various parts of our ecosystem on the vertical axis, and then look at time, we have a consistent profile or curve that results. It's this kind of hockey stick where you have virtually an ever-increasing magnitude in the number of units that are impacting our ecosystems. And as significant and more concerned as the frequency of change or the acceleration of change is so substantial that we are in fact threatened. And scientists have basically identified what we call planetary boundary conditions. And those are basically limits, the Earth system unit limits, that when you reach, it's almost irreversible to go back once you get too far past it. And so what's significant when we look at studies on the planet, there are a whole bunch of these Earth system factors: climate change, biodiversity, including deforestation, biogeochemical flows, and novel entities, where we are past the planetary boundary conditions. Now, just of these, climate change is the one we're most familiar with. It's measured in CO2. We're just blowing up to 400 parts per million and past it. And so that's of a huge concern. And when we have debates about climate change, we always ask people just to look at just their lives the past 20 years. 19 of the 20 hottest years on record have occurred in the last 20 years. And very significantly, sea surface temperatures are higher the past 3 decades than at any other time since reliable observations began, starting in 1880. And when sea level temperatures are up, now your hurricanes that used to be a few hundred miles in diameter are like 12 or 1,300 miles in diameter. And when hurricane ocean surges are 3 or 4 feet in the past, now they're 12, 14, 16-foot surges like we just had with Hurricane Ian. And that's because those warmer surface temperatures of the ocean are almost exponential in the amount of moisture that can evaporate into the atmosphere, and that's just pure physics. So climate change is really of a concern. Biodiversity and deforestation are, of course, very significant. Forests, grasslands, wetlands, other vegetation types are rapidly being converted to agriculture, and it's driving a lot of reductions in biodiversity and having dangerous impacts on water flows and our ecosystem. Half the species are in critical risk of extinction by 2100, with more than 1 in 4 species on Earth now facing extinction. That will rise to 50% by the end of the century unless urgent action is taken. And just for some more numbers, over 37,000 species, which are 28% of all the ones that were assessed, are directly threatened with extinction. And of course, you could take just one example like the honeybees and how critical they are to pollinating plants. And you kind of get the chain reaction that happens when we lose species and how they all interrelate. And then on novel entities, those are a large array of these what are called forever chemicals and toxic substances that when they get in the ground are there forever. You know, synthetic organic compounds, heavy metal compounds, radioactive materials. Just again, these are now so much being dropped into our ecosystem. We're now blowing past the planetary boundary conditions. Then we have a bunch of these Earth system units that are right at the edge of the planetary boundary condition. Ocean acidification is a direct outcome of carbon emissions. About 25% of CO2 emitted in the atmosphere by human activities ultimately dissolve in the oceans, where it forms carbonic acid and it decreases the pH of the surface water. This ocean acidity is already increased by 30% compared to what it was pre-industrial time. This makes it really hard for organisms such as corals and shellfish and plankton species to grow and survive. And then as a result, it's disrupting all the other ocean ecosystems with really drastic reductions in fish stocks. We keep hearing about dead zones the size of huge states all over the oceans. So again, the ocean acidification is a huge concern that it's approaching the planetary boundary condition. And Sarah mentioned just how critical fresh water is as well. 21 of the 37 world's major aquifers are receding substantially. Water demand globally is projected to increase by 55% between 2020 and 2050. Agriculture accounts for 70% of global fresh water use, while food production will need to grow by almost 70% by 2035 to feed the growing population. You kind of see we're in one big freshwater drain globally and already at dangerously low levels. So you could just see all these threats to our planet are so serious, and they're all kind of interrelated and working together. And then you take this piece of land. This is a depiction of land that was sitting on the landscape for hundreds of thousands of years, pretty much as you see it depicted here. And then in a blip of time, this piece of land became this. The original depiction was done by the National Geographic Society, but here you go. That is basically evidence that any solution we have to save the planet must involve buildings. And as Sarah said, a stunning statistic is you take all the square footage of buildings in all 5 boroughs of New York City, and it's being constructed every 35 days, 2 trillion square feet. There's no path to stabilizing and minimizing the tremendous risk we face on this planet that does not involve zero carbon buildings. And as Sarah mentioned, buildings account for 40% of all energy consumption and about 70% of all electricity consumption. About 70% of all electricity is produced with fossil fuels. So any solution to stabilizing our planet and meeting these planetary boundary conditions must involve zero buildings. And then we know that our country is just about 4% of the global world population, but we account for 14% of all the greenhouse gas emissions, 3.5x per capita than the global average. So there is no path where we don't involve the US as a major provider of solutions to efficient buildings. Any solution must involve the US. And also, zero is really important goal, but we have to understand that there are limitations. There are climate conditions where there isn't adequate solar resources in some locations, or buildings are located in urban centers where there's not a lot of access to sun because of various building heights that shade other buildings. Or there could be other factors that make zero not possibly, not reasonable for a building. So zero ready is such an important way to frame what we need to do, because we can always provide renewable power to buildings over time, but we can't change the enclosures, we can't change the foundations, we can't change the basic infrastructure of the building. We have to get that right. So I like to suggest zero ready is an important solution because we must be inclusive. every building must be able to achieve the zero target that we set, because the transformation to zero buildings is absolutely critical. And also, we must understand how we get there. And we get to zero buildings by first optimizing energy efficiency. That's the very first critical step. We want to get optimum efficient solutions for the enclosure and everything inside our buildings. So then we want to optimize performance. It's going to be a fool's errand to have all this efficiency and have buildings that aren't comfortable, durable, safe. So we have to optimize performance as well. And as Sarah mentioned, electric ready is an absolute essential. It's where every major solution to a zero carbon building sector has to go. So our buildings have to be electric ready. And the good thing is electric ready is easy to do for very low cost, and it avoids all these other huge cost increases that would happen in absence of this readiness. And it happens also without disrupting the building when buildings are ready to go electric by matter of the simple details and features that are embedded in how it's built. And when you have all this, you can get there with simple solutions. The Zero Energy Ready Home program from which I came was all geared to providing this kind of complete package to make it so simple. And then you add resilience, which is an absolute must-have as we face greater and greater climate risks, whether it's drought, greater intensity and frequency of storms and hurricanes and tornadoes, whether it's wildfires. All these risks have to be managed because, again, it's foolish to build a high-performance, super efficient building that can stand for hundreds of years only to be at risk to prevailing disasters that happen in your location. And lastly, we need to address embodied carbon. So these are all the key building blocks that Sarah was laying out. And any solution must be simple. We must be very effective conveying what we're trying to achieve with zero in a way that's understood. We don't overwhelm and confuse people. So I like this very simple way to just logically show the path we have to take to get to zero carbon. And then we have to understand amazing things are happening. We have over 30,000 homes built by builders voluntarily that are certified to zero energy and zero energy ready in the US and Canada. Builders are really jumping in and demonstrating just how cost effective and how feasible it is to build zero carbon buildings or be in the path to zero carbon buildings. Dozens of cities are enacting policies and programs that promote renewables and zero carbon buildings. 7 states have committed to zero energy codes. 18 states have policies for 100% clean energy, renewable energy by 2030, 2035. And then we have nations are committing to amazing policies and regulations that are moving their respective countries to zero carbon. It could be like in our US codes, we have the 2021 IECC, which is effectively a zero energy ready enclosure code. And there are also other policies like in the IRA and other things we're doing here in our country. Other countries around the world are following suit. So the zero movement has begun. And the key is to support it, nurture it, and to keep building on this platform to get to zero carbon buildings. And here's the good news, instead of just laying out all these scary risks about what happens, this is that same hockey stick curve I showed you earlier. This one's actually a more precise depiction of what happened with stratospheric ozone. As you know, the stratospheric ozone layer filters out UV radiation from the sun that has substantial impact on health, particularly skin cancer. And fortunately, because the actions taken as a result of the Montreal Protocol in 1987, we are on the path to stay within the planetary boundary limits and much, much better position to have successfully addressed this severe challenge to our planet. This is a demonstration that leadership is everything. When we follow wisdom, when we apply good leadership, we can address these challenges. It's not to be overwhelmed by everything you hear from Sarah and myself. It's understand we have an urgent situation, but action can make a difference with good wisdom and the right leadership. So let's move into how do we start applying that wisdom and leadership in government and suggest there's an efficient government imperative. So let's start with some background information about just the debt crisis. The left, you have the spending of money committed to spend. This was based on 2011, a study that was reported on in the Bloomberg back then. And then on the right, you have all the receipts that are expected to flow in as a result, and you have effectively back then in 2011, a $12 trillion national debt just at that time. And unfortunately, when you look at all the receipts and everything's locked up and all the spending and receipts that's going to flow into the future, what's really scary and what very few people talk about is that this is all compounding, and we have effectively a fiscal gap at that time that was $211 trillion. I can't even understand that number. I don't even know how to make any sense of it. It is so large. And what's really scary is now I went to the national debt dashboard today, and we're at $31.2 trillion of debt. We have a huge crisis. Eventually, things have to happen. And the reason is because this is a curve that looks like the hockey curve, but it is for the US federal debt as a percent of gross domestic product. And you'll notice that the magnitude, again, is going off the charts. At the same time, it's accelerating off the charts. This cannot continue at this acceleration and this growth without things collapsing. At some point, government spending has to be managed and under control. And so I ask a question: should we expect the same ultra efficiency and minimum waste we expect from zero carbon buildings from government programs? Well, that's my question to this audience. And what I want to do is give you a personal journey to test out how much ultra efficiency and waste can be extracted. And I had the amazing opportunity to put that into practice. I could not have had a better job of a lifetime than to direct the National Energy Star Certified Home Program. And when we were watching well past 1 million homes, it was time for me to go. I wanted to work in a program where I could apply all the wisdom we had earned and gained running that program for 17 years and see what would happen if we applied it to a new program, in this case, the Zero Energy Ready Home Program at the Department of Energy. This is the very first job in a lifetime where I actually took a job and I knew how to do the job. Every other job was a fake it till you make it situation, which you all probably recognize. But I knew exactly what to do, and the question was, how much efficiency and how much waste could be extracted with wisdom and leadership that benefited from everything we learned. And what I first, and so I'm going to show you the investment in each program and the net savings that we extracted. So in terms of full-time staff, person years, there are about 5 full-time PY for Energy Star certified homes that are left. We ran from the very beginning Zero Energy Ready Home with 0.5. That was the 10x savings in just staff required. Of course, once you set up a program and have people working, you're locked into the program. Federal governments and any government can never reduce people, even though the scope of work may diminish as a program has more efficiency opportunities. Then the contract dollars per year were $2 million approximately for Energy Star. There was a big technical contract and a marketing contract. All we had was one contract to do both for Zero Ready for $0.5 million. That was 4x less cost, even with 10x less staff to run the program. Then the tracking system for Energy Star certified homes was about $2 million to develop and maintain. The Zero Energy Ready Home Program completely ignored the tracking system that was used at Energy Star. And for a few $100,000, we paid ResNet to modify their schema for the registry so we could extract all the certifications in real time from our builder partners. That was a 10x savings for a far superior outcome. We got more data, we got it in real time, we're getting all sorts of metrics we never could get just with the tracking system we spent millions of dollars for with Energy Star. And we didn't require HERS raters every 3 months to put this whole spreadsheet together to compile all the certifications that they had done. There was zero reporting by the raters, zero burden, because we were just able to extract it from the ResNet registry. We recognized right on that ResNet was developing it. We managed to operate manually for the first few years, and then when we could get ResNet to help us with a schema to modify the registry so we can extract data and pay them for it, this was a 10x improvement in savings for a far, far better outcome. And then on the awards program, Energy Star was forced to use the big Energy Star Partner of the Year event. We rented a huge hotel ballroom. Hundreds of people had to come. It was all the cost of the food and the event, major production value, crazy amount of activity. And when all the builders would come, we only gave out 5 awards or 6 awards to various categories. There were no other builders to see the amazing work they were done. They were just in this big ballroom, and the cost that was allocated roughly for the Energy Star Homes program was roughly about, I would estimate about $250,000. It would probably cost about $1 million plus to do the event each year. With Zero Energy Ready Home, we said, why not do it for free in a place where the whole industry could see the accomplishments of our leading builders? And we formed a partnership with EBA. At their annual conference, we would have our builders recognized by 500 other industry professionals, builders, raters, program managers, and seeing their great work. And it cost us nothing but the cost of food. No, it didn't cost us that. We were at the lunch for the conference. So we'd spend about $10,000 in logistics to make that happen, usually as a grant to EBA for supporting us. So that was a 25x savings for a far, far better outcome. Our best partners being recognized, or best builders being recognized by an entire industry group, not by a whole ballroom filled with people from 30 other Energy Star product categories who wouldn't recognize their excellence and be able to apply it in their own businesses. And the other thing we did was we increased the number of awards from 5 or 6 or 7 to about 25 to 30, because we want anyone that was deserving and a great ambassador for the excellence that could be accomplished in design and performance, we wanted to showcase. So amazing savings, amazing better outcome. Again, we're in multiple cost savings that are significant. The partner meetings per year costs were about $100,000 for Energy Star versus 1,000 or 100x difference. Energy Star, we put on this partner conference every year for mostly utility partners would come. And again, we would get a room somewhere. A lot of people fly in. It was tremendous cost for a 2 or 3 day event. And it was from utility partners who weren't even the core partner for the program. The core customers, the builders who label, and the raters who are sales force delivering the label to the builders. So in contrast, what Zero Ready Home did, we used again the EBA conference and the ResNet conference to gather the builders and raters to have roundtable meetings, and we set up the meetings instead of just being kind of random discussions to get feedback how the program can be improved, and then present a report card. Here's what you told us last year to do. Here's what we did, A, B, C, D, F, and let's now work on what we need to do next year. So you had a constant feedback mechanism showing that we were listening and then applying what we heard, and here are the results we got, and very tough scoring on ourselves. We would grade ourselves and show how we were trying to do better and better to meet our customers' needs, the builders and the raters, for 100x less cost, just because we used the existing assets that were out there. And lastly, HERS rater software, I'm estimating that the Energy Star program, home program, spent about $500,000 for that. And we spend zero because it's not our core business. A rater tool is not what we're in business to do. We're in business to move the industry to the next level of super high performance homes. So we would never spend that money developing a rated tool. So you can just see from this chart, when you had the ability to apply all the wisdom that you learned from a program and how much savings you could extract, how much waste you can get rid of. It is staggering. All to suggest this is just one small little, very small example of how, again, how much more efficient you can operate that I believe can be extracted or applied to much more large programs. So let me give you a proposal for a complete zero energy housing market transformation with the same 10 to 100x savings in waste and gains in efficiency. And what I want to do is convert the mortgage interest deduction from a huge liability into an asset by tying it to zero energy ready new and existing homes. And so essentially, I stole this amazing expert from McKinsey and Company who was on loan to the Department of Energy, and I had him in 2 weeks build a model to calculate all the impacts from transforming a market from code to zero ready and making existing homes at least 30% more efficient. And the numbers are not important here. It was a model we did 8, 9 years ago, and the guy was absolutely brilliant. But it's the scale of the impact that I want to share with you that I think is amazing. It was over $1 trillion of utility bill savings if you could have a true market transformation. It was about $250 billion of additional construction revenue to be available to the building industry. There's about $4.5 trillion of additional tax revenue to the US Treasury, about 9 million job years of work, about 2,000 plus trillion BTUs energy savings, almost 8,500 million metric tons of carbon equivalent in reduced emissions. And we would take the infrastructure issue that no one talks about, the fact that 80 to 90% of the housing stock is substandard. It is not as healthy as it should be, not as durable as it should be, it's not as affordable as it should be, and we would transform that stock to zero ready by 2035 and address a major infrastructure issue. That's the prize that's there for the taking by converting the mortgage interest deduction into an asset instead of a liability. And why is it such a liability? This is the one chart I could find from all my digging that lays out what it costs the federal government for all the various tax exemptions, deductions, credits, and loopholes. And you'll see that the second highest tax expenditure is the deduction for mortgage interest. It's over $104 billion a year. And what's also egregious about that tax expenditure is these are the various income levels on how that tax deduction expenditure is distributed. And you'll see about 70% plus of the mortgage interest deduction tax benefit goes to households with incomes greater than $100,000. Very income regressive. And so the second idea is to understand is that we have some stranded assets. The Zero Energy Ready program is on the same kind of trajectory as Energy Star, but it's much more at the beginning of the exponential growth curve. And it's there for the taking to get homes 40% more efficient and more healthy and more durable than the 2009 IECC. And also the Department of Energy has a program called the Home Energy Score, and it's an asset score that can be used as a metric to target 20 to 30% energy savings. And the reason I call it a stranded asset is the participation is barely a ripple in the 100+ million homes that are out there. And if we could leverage those stranded assets, we can get amazing benefits in terms of persistent jobs, cleaner air, energy independence, and stronger communities. So let's look at this transformation opportunity to convert the liability, the mortgage interest deduction, into an asset by retooling it. And instead of eliminating it, it's like that would be heresy. All we want to do is change the Treasury Department policy by adding 2 simple requirements for the tax benefit. In other words, you have to earn the mortgage interest deduction, but in reality, what you're doing is acting in your own self-interest, because we all know that the ownership costs, including both the mortgage and the energy savings, is so far to the advantage with zero energy ready homes compared to code homes. So the new home must be certified as zero energy ready, and the existing home must achieve a home energy score of 7.5 out of a scale of 10, as is, or you must achieve that score by either being at that level as is, or with an upgrade to be performed within a year. So if your home is already energy efficient, you're going to be rewarded because you're selling a home that will qualify for the mortgage interest deduction. If it's not at a 7.5, all the owner has to do is upgrade within a year. And this is a deal too good to refuse. It's about, when you do the mortgage deduction calculator, it's about $6,000 a year. And over the average 10 years of home ownership, that's a benefit that represents over $60,000. It's a deal too good to refuse. And so the strategy for doing this would be to target single family homes because they're easiest to implement with the least friction, the least cost, and the least complexity. And the last thing you want with a tremendously substantial policy change is to have any early failures that will allow it to be rescinded. So you want easiest to implement for sure. And you have to allow adequate lead time to develop the design infrastructure, the verification infrastructure, financing, installation. And Sarah mentioned the utility infrastructure has to figure out how to work with these super low load, zero energy homes. So you allow the lead time for that. And then you assure no additional borrower down payment or income. And that's simply by requiring underwriters to offer energy improvement mortgages, EIMs or IMs, for existing homes and energy efficient mortgages, EIMs, for new homes. FHA and VA already offer these. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac used to. So we want just to get Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac back into the fold with EIMs and IMs. And then you want to ensure equity. You're going to have massive amount of resources saved from the energy efficiency rebates, tax credits, and mortgage income tax deduction to fund low-income housing programs so they can be upgraded. So that's the basic strategy for implementation. And the savings would be roughly $500 billion, half a trillion, for mortgage interest deduction over 10 years. I did some back-of-the-envelope calculation for how much we would save by not needing the 45L tax credit. That's about $25 billion. And I would submit that the 45L tax credit would be a small fraction of the market transformation you would get with a retooled mortgage interest deduction. And assuming utility rebates would come in somewhere the same as the 45L tax credit, I add another $25 billion of 10-year savings. So that's a huge amount of benefit. Again, as a resource to allocate in part to upgrading the low-income housing stock in the country. And the way you implement this is with a collective impact process. You create content and analysis to support a common agenda for revising the mortgage interest tax credit to almost kind of force decision makers to consider a much better tax policy. And you engage all the concomitant interests in mutually reinforcing activities, educating, advocating, and influencing change. The federal programs that benefit: Energy Star, Zero Ready, weatherization, high performance product manufacturers and associations that will have huge benefits to their industries in terms of increased demand for their products and services, NGOs who align with their mission for why they exist, underwriters who will be vested in homes that have far lower risk, and underwriting loans and mortgages is all about selling a product that is driven by risk, and tremendous risk reduction for them, and the same for the insurance industry. So you can get all these concomitant interests are kind of corralled, herd the cats, and get them aligned around a common agenda. And I'm sure there's a path to get us to act in our own self-interest. And why this would work is, again, the $6,000 a year tax benefits and offer too good to refuse. We will estimate, with that high a benefit at stake, 66% of home transactions, or 40 million zero energy ready new and existing homes in 10 years. If 40 million of the 100 million home housing stock is at that level, that will force and drag the rest of the industry to match to be competitive. Jobs, you'll have demand for high-paying jobs that cannot be outsourced. Persistence, you'll lock in energy savings and benefits for 100 years with the new infrastructure. You'll have energy supply reliability with substantially reduced electricity demand and peak demand that should also help stabilize the grid. Greater housing equity with the savings being invested from an income regressive policy into low-income housing, and rewarding good behavior. All the homeowners who've been taking prudent action to make their homes more efficient get rewarded because they now own homes that qualify for this tax benefit. It's so important in government policy to reward good behavior, not bad behavior. And lastly, you optimize all this investment in innovation. You're going to accelerate the adoption of proven innovation from government, from industry, and get a return on investment from our taxpayer resources put into those innovations. So that's a huge reasons why I believe it should work. And the conclusion is by applying wisdom, we can result in negative government expense and a zero energy housing market transformation that provides important social change, climate risk, equitable housing, good governance, that realizes huge benefits for people, the economy, the planet, jobs, tax revenue, energy savings, carbon savings, better housing, and accelerate innovation, good governance, financing, technology. So here we are. This is where you want to be. And we have to start asking ourselves, are we electing, are we appointing, are we assuring our leaders bring this wisdom to their government positions? It's time to expect more wisdom from government. And I think we should challenge every vote we make, every decision we make to ensure we're getting to the best leadership. Leadership's everything. And so I want to thank you all for letting me just expand on these concepts. Again, a lot of the ideas and stuff that I like to present are derivative of the work we've done with the Housing 2.0 program. Essentially, it's about extracting massive waste and optimizing efficiency at every facet of how and why we build homes, not just for performance, but for community, for design, for quality, and even for the sales experience before, during, after sale. So thank you so much. I'm going to hand it to you, Mike.
Thank you, sir. Very much appreciated. I'm going to pop back on here because we're now able to take your questions. You can use those by either submitting them in the questions box or the chat, depending upon if we've been dialoguing or not during this. I do have one question that was sent in earlier, and it's most likely for Sarah, given that it came in during her presentation. Sarah, Billy wanted to know, won't atmospheric water generation eventually affect weather, especially in the Southwest?
That is a great question, Billy. And the real answer is, I don't know that any of us have any idea what the impact is. I think that from what I have read about these technologies, they have been designed so that at least at this point, they're not going to have a huge impact on weather or humidity, even in arid climates. And I just assume that's because of kind of a net effect of, kind of pulling that air out of the water, but then, having a release in other ways. The other thing is, I don't know that these technologies will be deployed at such scale to have those impacts. I think that there will be other innovative water solutions that will be created on a community and a municipality scale. We're starting to see some of those innovations emerge. I just started reading about some water storage systems, kind of like battery storage systems for energy, but water energy storage systems that are pretty interesting that'll have a positive impact in places like Nevada and California on municipality water availability. So I think we're also going to see some desalination technologies, again, at kind of a municipal and state and regional scale, just because we have to get there. So Billy, I don't know that those technologies will be deployed so widely that all of a sudden we're not going to have any moisture at all in the air. But it's a great question. And I mean, conceivably it could happen, I suppose, if everybody started relying on those, and especially here, in the Southwest where water is so precious. We got to be thinking about that kind of stuff. So thanks for the question. I wish I had a better answer.
I think part of the concern too is if the projections are correct and there's going to be more of a temperature drought, then some of that moisture doesn't get up into the atmosphere because things evaporate really quickly, so they will get up there. We'll see similar precipitation. But yeah, it's not an easy answer there, Sarah, and it's something that I'd love to have a scientist on here to kind of walk through that sometime. So maybe it's a future webinar for us.
Yeah, or something that we can, certainly look into and then maybe write an article or a blog about it. The atmospheric generator technology is something that we're looking into. I think, for those of you who follow Green Builder Media, you've hopefully seen an initiative that we've recently launched called Transcend Communities, which are communities that really utilize kind of leapfrog technologies like atmospheric generators and solar plus storage and really advanced, kind of waste treatment, so that communities, especially let's say in rural areas that, are 18 miles away from the nearest utility, or, in areas where, say, utilities are already overwhelmed, or, like we talked about earlier, water tap fees are so high, or there's, energy grid pressure, where we can start creating communities that, again, leapfrog our existing technology and kind of become their own microgrids, not only with respect to energy, but water as well. And we're starting to see some pretty cool things. I will kind of give a little sneak peek under the curtain and say we're also working on some Housing 2.0 communities with Sam to kind of showcase everything that he's talking about in the book and in his workshops that also use some of these leapfrog technologies. And I think that, hopefully we'll be able to show some use cases and case studies so that we can show that the numbers not only, pencil out, but that this actually becomes, a cost beneficial approach.
We did have a question, speaking of Sam, we did have a question for Sam from Karina. She was wanting to know, what is the average cost of a zero home? To build one, either on a square foot basis or if you're doing something like a 3-bed, 2-bath. And I know that's going to vary depending upon the market you're building in, but you want to talk a little bit about just kind of some of those, maybe some ranges there?
Yeah, this is another one of those questions where the famous 2-word answer will apply. It depends. The biggest thing I'll suggest is that, again, not to harp on Housing 2.0, but our whole program is dedicated to extracting waste and optimizing efficiency so that you actually can build zero energy homes for lower cost, not higher cost. But taking credit for really good wisdom and how you design a home and how you get rid of square footage you don't need, how you integrate systems so you avoid tremendous costs when systems are not integrated, how you use the best choices for wall assemblies that are lower cost but are higher performing. We go through all these choices and details so that if you start with a blank slate, here, business as usual, how we build a house, you can build zero for a lot less cost. Generally, we're showing we can get 30–70% cost savings and added value just by applying the assortment of best practices to these homes. There are 150 plus that we go over in the book. So the short answer is that if we optimize the entire home as a system, not just the performance, there are amazing ways we can do it for less cost. If you look at strictly the incremental cost to get to a zero energy ready level of performance, our analysis was showing on average about $5,000 to $9,000 per house of added costs. Now, if you look at today's mortgage rate, about 6%, you're looking at roughly $30 to $50 a month in the mortgage. And if you look at the rising energy costs, we're easily offsetting that mortgage increase by the energy savings. So again, I would submit you're doing zero energy for lower costs rather than higher costs if you look at the true cost of home ownership, which is always what we go after. But when you are, first cost world, and you have to understand those first costs, generally $5,000 to $9,000. And the only thing I'll mention right now is that the 45L tax credit is a $5,000 rebate. So right there you have a huge offset to the extra cost, first cost, if you're not even looking at the true cost of ownership.
Sam, I had a question for you. And by the way, this is the final call to our audience for questions. In the proposal that you put forth in your presentation, and I apologize if I missed this, but how does it work if it's not your primary residence? So let's say I'm an investor, right, and I own 15 homes and rent out 14 of them and live in one. Does this still apply in that kind of situation then?
The only way we get to our targeted goals for zero carbon buildings that can ensure our planet does not get over to irreversible Earth system factors is by ensuring every home at transaction has to meet these new expectations for zero energy or zero energy ready. And so every home purchase, that transaction would have to. So if you're building 15 homes to rent, if you're buying multiple homes just to be in the business of whatever, Airbnb or whatever you want to do, it makes no difference. Any home at transaction would have to meet those requirements. And again, it's at the end of the day, it's asking people to act in their self-interest, to build a home that will live healthier, to a home that will have lower ownership costs, to build a home that will have higher future value, to build a home that will have greater durability and protection from moisture issues. Everything that consumers would want and homeowners would want. So.
All right. Well, seeing no more questions, I am going to go ahead and put a wrap on this one and thank both you and Sarah for sharing your insights with us today. Thank you also to our audience. Always ask great questions and appreciate those. And thank you to Mitsubishi Electric, Westlake Royal Building Products, Schneider Electric, Panasonic Healthy Indoor Living Solutions, PowerShift by NV Energy, and Dupont for the generous sponsorship of this program. Now, if you enjoyed today's webinar and you'd like to learn more about this Housing 2.0 thing that's been mentioned a few times, you can simply register now for our Series 3 workshops. That's a 6-part online series that's going to begin on Thursday, November 3rd, and it starts around 12 p.m. Eastern time, and we run, like I said, six weeks of that. We will obviously skip Thanksgiving here in the United States, but join us. Sam is the main attraction. I just open and close meetings. To find out more, you can go to greenbuildermedia.com/housing-2.0 to learn more and also to register. Now, we're going to be right back here in 3 weeks for a webinar focused on the residential provisions of the 2021 IECC. With the massive amount of state and local level financial incentives in the Inflation Reduction Act, it's going to be vital to get up to speed on this code as quickly as possible. Suffice to say, you're not going to want to miss this webinar. So join us, please, on Wednesday, November 9th, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, when we're joined by Shauna Mozingo of the Mozingo Code Group. I hope you all get a chance to enjoy some fall foliage while it's still on display. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and take care, everyone. So long.